I think I got this from you. The idea that sanctions and weaponizing the US dollar only works once. It's a sort of a weapon or a gun that you can only shoot once, because once you fired it, then it's all completely used up. Can you explain why that's the case?
I think that's true now. That's a very good way to put it. It hasn't always been true, and here's what I mean by that. So, is the dollar a very powerful financial weapon? Yes, it is. Even with the diminution of the dollar's role, it's still close to 60% of global reserves, an even higher percentage of global payments. 80% of total global payments, about 100% of energy payments, 60% of global reserves. So the dollar is still very powerful in terms of capital markets. So the U.S. dollar markets are the largest markets in the world. The U.S. Treasury market is the largest securities market in the world, et cetera. So that's all still true. So if you want to take the dollar and use it very selectively, very pointedly at a particular target, it can be very effective. The problem, and this is where we are now, is when you roll out so many sanctions at so many targets that are on such an expansive basis, you force people to do the workaround. Whereas before they might have said, well, okay, I'll modify my policy. I'll meet you halfway. I'll do something to kind of keep you happy because I am suffering from this dollar sanction. But there comes a time, and I warned about this in at the Pentagon, U.S. Treasury officials, 10, 12 years ago. I was telling them this. I said, look, you're overusing it, and when you overuse it, you'll get some results in the short run, but what you'll do in the long run is you'll undermine the weapon, because people will say, okay, it used to be the safe haven, it used to be the rule of law, it used to be able to something I could count, it used to be something I could count on. None of that's true anymore. So why should I be in the dollar and help the United States if all you're going to do is use it against me? I'll just find some alternative. Now, that's easier said than done, but we're seeing it all over the world. The BRICS just had, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa are the big five BRICS, but they've now expanded their meetings and their work to include a lot more countries. So Argentina, Iran, Turkey, a lot of other important economies who have these BRICS conferences. They've announced that they're working on some kind of global settlement currency, and I would make the distinction between a payment currency and a reserve currency. People tend to confuse the two. They tend to talk about the reserve currency status. That's a tough nut to crack. It can happen. Sterling used to be the main reserve currency. It lost its role between 1914 and 1944, but that took 30 years. Now the dollar may be losing its role, but that's going to be a slow process. But the payment currency is different. You could use almost anything as a payment currency, assuming the parties agree. So they may come up with an international payment currency backed by a basket of commodities, and they're all commodity producers. Russia has oil and natural gas, Saudi Arabia has oil, Brazil again has oil, but also large agricultural output, largest or second largest soybean producer in the world. Africa has enormous mineral outputs, et cetera. So you go around the membership, and you can see that they've got the potential commodity backing for that. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, is a Central Asian group led by Russia and China. But again, they're attracting new members. They're working on something similar. And others are as well. And of course, we've got our friends over in crypto world. I don't think that will be a reserve currency probably ever. But as a medium of exchange, as a payment, it could perform a role. And I've lectured about and hypothesized that Russia and China could develop a new digital currency. It could be a cryptocurrency, call it the Xi coin, Putin coin, whatever you like, and use that as a payment mechanism. But all you're really doing with any payment currency is you're keeping score. So I buy some stuff from you, you buy some stuff from me, we keep a ledger, and then periodically we settle up. So whether it's quarterly, twice a year, once a year, I owe something to you, you owe something to me, and we settle that up, but we can settle it in gold. And so we don't need gold for every payment. It's not a full-scale gold standard. We're using gold as a backstop, but here's the important thing: if we're making a net payment instead of a gross payment, see, if I have to pay you in gold for everything I buy, you have to pay me in gold for everything you buy, that's a lot of gold. But if we just keep score with some kind of crypto digital ledger and then settle up on the net, the net's a lot smaller than the gross, and so we can settle in gold with a lot less gold. That's feasible. So all these things are underway. I'm not saying they're going to happen overnight, but this is what the U.S. has squandered probably its most powerful financial weapon for not only not much gain, but pain. We're suffering from the sanctions. We're not gaining from the sanctions, but we are destroying the dollar in the process. I've often said that no foreign actor could destroy the dollar, but we could do it ourselves.
You didn't just warn people about this, you showed them how it would happen. At the beginning of, I think, currency wars, you played an economic war game inside the Pentagon. And I don't remember exactly what happened during that war game, but all of it, the news is sounding mighty familiar to me.
Yeah, the problem with being ahead of your time is people forget you ever said it. But thank you. Yeah, the Currency Wars is a book I wrote mostly in 2010. It was published in 2011, so that's 11 years old. But two of the chapters rather talked about the first ever financial war game sponsored by the Pentagon. Pentagon actually was Pacific Command, PACOM. Were the sponsors. We did it at the Warfare Analysis Laboratory at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory, about halfway between Washington and Baltimore. I was one of the facilitators, so I had the fun of actually designing the game. It's like if you ever play Risk or any other strategic game, you got to write the rules. And they didn't need any help from me in terms of war games generally, but they did need help in terms of financial war games because that was new. And so they brought in some financial experts, and I was one of them. But then I got to play. I was on one of the teams, and it was 2 days in the laboratory, and I came home, and my wife said, "How did it go?" And I said, "Well, good news and bad news." I said, "The good news is my team won. The bad news is I played China." But what we did, and I had a friend who was sort of a plant on the Russian team. We broke a lot of rules, but I said it's a war, so there are no rules. So what we did is we had Russia announced that it was going to acquire gold or had acquired gold and was launching a new gold-backed currency, that China would join them. And the currency would be issued by a new bank, but the bank would be formed under the laws of the UK because it's a good rule of law jurisdiction. And it would be based in, and the vault with the gold would be in Switzerland. Nobody would trust the Russians or the Chinese with the gold. But if you had your gold in Switzerland, your bank in the UK, you issued a currency backed by gold. But the kicker was China and Russia said, from now on, if you want Russian energy or Chinese manufactured goods, you have to pay for it in this currency. And then the question is, well, how do you get that currency? Well, you could, they could lend it to you. The banks can originate loans, so you could borrow some if you wanted, or you could put your own gold in the vault and the bank would issue you currency based on your gold deposit. And the third way to get it would be to run a trade surplus. So they were paying you in this currency and you had some because you had the surplus and you could use it to buy their stuff. This was 2009 that we did this. As I said, the book came out in 2011. 13 years ago at this point, we got laughed at. There were some Harvard professors who said, "Why are you guys even talking about gold? It's not part of the monetary system. You're wasting our time." When we made our first move, you do war games in rounds, and then you have plenary sessions, and you go back to your embassy and you do the next round over a couple of days. And there's a team, the red cell was China, and the blue cell was the United States, and so forth. They have different color codes. But the white cell are the referees, and they also give points or take them away. And they said our move was illegal. And I got out of my seat and said, it can't be illegal. It's a war. And they said, you're right. Well, we'll let you do it. It's not illegal, but it's just dumb. But we'll let you go ahead and play it. Anyway, at the end of 2 days, it had taken on a life of its own. So proof of the pudding, what's happened since then? Since we did this, and again, we got kind of ridiculed, Russia has almost quadrupled its gold reserves. They've gone from 600 tons to about 2,400 metric tons. China has more than tripled its gold reserves from 600 tons to about 1,900 tons that we know of. But there's very good reason to believe that China's gold is actually substantially more than that because they're not transparent. Russia's fairly transparent. China is not. So they tell the world they have 1,900. Really good chance that they're well above 3,000, maybe on the way to 4,000 tons at this point. We just don't know, but we can be confident it's a lot more than 2,000 tons. So they've done exactly what we've said. And now we're at the crunch point. Now we're at the point where not only do they have the goal, but they're in a position to and motivated to go ahead and implement this. And China thinks ahead. I mean, they probably think ahead 100 years. So they're looking at Russia and say, well, we see how the United States has weaponized the dollar against Russia. Leave aside the fact that it's not working very well, but they've done it. What are we going to do? Just wait for them to do it to us? What if they don't like something we do in the South China Sea? What if the U.S. doesn't like something we do in Taiwan? Short of a full-scale invasion, they'll just do it to us. So what are we waiting for? Let's get up into the dollar system while we can.
Yeah, so it's all very familiar to you, isn't it? Having played that game. The currency wars have taken on a reverse nature of late, where